Hey, yo, what's up? What's good, my fellow minks of the Blue Sea? How you been doing? Just as promised, I'm back today. I do some more discussion videos, and this one in particular, we talk about the man himself, Mr. Gomu Gomu, the rubber band man, Lucy, the phenom from Fuchsia, the one, the only, Monkey Luffy. Mugiwara. That's what we talking about today. And this is basically just a revised version of a video I did some time ago, back when I had all my content and less stupidity. So for those of you who don't know, I posted my update. I had lost everything previously, but it was due to just not knowing what I'm doing with the editing process, and should have just left everything alone. Basically one of those things. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The good part about it, though, is I've had some time to look at some other things when it comes to this subject in particular that wasn't apparent at the time, because we didn't know what Rio was when I did that video. It hadn't been introduced yet, and because of that, it adds some potential to what I think he's going to be doing later. And I kind of just wanted to go over like his path with his abilities, not necessarily the story itself, just him and his abilities, his strength, and what's going on later. And one of the reasons was when I did this video originally, it was one of my first ones, but it was the one I had the most fun with initially besides Sword. And the response I got from it, I'm like, oh, this is why people do this. This is dope. Like, oh, okay, cool. That was pretty cool. Like one of those things. So I wanted to revisit that and add some stuff and some more ideas I had that I never would have thought of without knowing about Rio. So now that we got out the way, let's just get right into it, man. First and foremost, obviously he's the main character and he's awarded certain qualities that other people don't get, right? But for the most part, he's earned everything that he's gotten with his abilities. And I mean everything. He's been beaten, batterized, bruised, embarrassed, everything you can think of, right? Well, in terms of the top tiers of the series, including Devil Fruit users, they've all had their fruit for decades. I'm assuming most of them, because obviously it's not stated every time when X got X. But even with the Kainu and Aokiji, we know basically as at least 20 years they've had their abilities because of what Robin's age was during the Ohara flashback. So a lot of these guys have had their fruit for a long time. But you know who else has too? Luffy. Okay, this kid, he's still a kid, still snot-nosed, still getting slapped up by Yonkos, but he's had his ability for almost a decade and a half now going on. That's a long time for not having proper training, of course, but the experience of using your ability day in, day out, whether it be fighting or just doing dumb stuff, he's been using it. And of course, there is some correlation to life force and all that, but I'm not going to get heavy into this video or foreshadowing, nothing like that. I just want to talk about him and his powers, because rubber is busted. Normally that's not something you want happening, but rubber is but it's busted. In this series it is. And that's because I think with Paramecia especially, compared to Zoans, not counting Ancient and Mythical, but just straight up Zoans, and some of the other abilities, they're very like the Lokius, they're very straightforward. Your imagination, I'm sure, is required, but not so much like how it is with Paramecia's. Because if you look at Law, now Law, Sugar, or Law, Big Mom, Sugar, Fujitora, they're kind of in a different class, and Bonnie, right? They're broken fruits too. But for the most part, when you think of most powerful fruits, the Gomu Gomu is nowhere near on your list. And I do think personality and Devil Fruit matter, because if you notice throughout the entire story, and part of that might just be because Oda writes it that way for like symbolism and stuff, but most Devil Fruit users, their powers fit their personality. That's how the way it's been done the entire series so far, and Luffy's no exception to this, right? He's a flexible, adaptive type of character who can make something out of nothing. And rubber does the same thing. Like in our world, we use it for everything. Okay, I don't know if you looked outside and seen any vehicles lately, but almost every vehicle on this planet that can move in some way has rubber in it, including ships, airplanes, spaceships, you name it, they all use rubber. So this is a very versatile substance. And in this series, what substance you are kind of matters, doesn't it? From somebody like Akainu being magma, being, Aokiji being ice, you got Crocodile being sand, Katakuri being mochi, you know what I mean? We have all these different things. So what substance you are actually matters. And in the case with Paramecia, because in Luffy's case, his ability is passive. He can't create rubber, he just is rubber. And I do think he will not become, because I've seen some ideas out there about his awakening. I'm going to get into that a little later, but I don't think he'll be producing rubber yet. I don't think that's what's going to be going on. And I'm going to explain why in a little bit, but I just want to get that statement out, right? Now, when it comes to how he's utilized his ability, the entire series, it's been pretty similar most of the time. He's either stretching or bouncing. That's pretty much it. To include Gear 4th, to include Snake Man, which is basically a Gear 2nd version of Gear 4th, Gear 2nd itself, Gear 3rd, right? All of his attacks, most of them involve stretching or bouncing. So that's something he understands, and he's been utilizing it this entire time. But there is a property he has not been utilizing when it comes to rubber, and it's stickiness. And the funny part about it is, when I was rereading some old chapters to see how far back I was looking up something. But anyway, when I was reading Dressrosa again, but something that was interesting to me that I kind of forgot about was Luffy didn't have any way of dealing with Treble once he got captured. And the part of him being sticky was highlighted. And it was something at the time, you don't really notice because you're more focused on the story. You're not really thinking about stuff like that. But then we turn around and then we get to Whole Cake Island. And what was the one thing, not just the hockey stuff and just Katakuri in general, I remember taking plot out of this. What was the one thing that was hard for him to deal with, Katakuri, was the stickiness of Mochi. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Why has this been done twice? I just found it interesting, and in the fact that even Luffy had stated, I'm using haki, why can't I get around this? And we know in the end why that was when it comes to Treble. I was thinking of Trevor, the name Trevor. But we seen what happened in the end of that. But in the Katakuri fight, he didn't have an answer for it. Just like he didn't have an answer for it with Treble. His strength didn't matter. His speed did not matter. And I'm bringing this up because there was an SBS during Dressrosa that I'm going to show you here that, once again, take everything with a grain of salt, obviously. What was brought up had to do with this statement that the strength of a person does not correlate to the strength of their abilities. And I found that interesting because when you think about somebody getting stronger, you just assume their fruit ability gets stronger too. And that's not like, that would be a normal route to think, right? That makes total sense. Well, he got stronger, so his fruit could get stronger. It's not necessarily true, but also vice versa, meaning he doesn't have to physically become stronger for his fruit to become stronger either. Because like Dofi and many of others have stated, it's how you use your ability, right? It's the how part. Because on paper, Luffy should not be a top pirate in the series. Just based on fighting ability. I'm not talking about his feats, just fighting wise. He should nowhere be near a top fighter compared to the other ones when you got stuff like the Pika Pika, running around here. And even Dofi's fruit is probably more busted than Luffy's is, right? So that just tells me that the focusing more on the imagination part. And because of his imagination, and he never had formal, proper training as a fighter. Not once his entire life, really, up until Rayleigh. We can assume Garp did some minor stuff with him, but it was implied that he kind of just dropped him somewhere off and pretty much, hey, get it how you live, rubber boy. Like, that's pretty much it. And Ace and Sabo were children too. They were skilled for that age of being fighters, but they were not proper trainers. They hadn't been anywhere or experienced anything. So up until that entire time of basically 10 years of no focused trainer or leadership, he got pretty far just on his own imagination. Into Rayleigh, he learns just a little bit about hockey. 18 months plus the what, I think 6 or 7 by himself. And look what he's already turned around. Up until the point, now where he has quote unquote future sight, sensory sight, whatever you want to call it. So even though he's not the smartest dude when it comes to learning something and adapting it to himself or in his surroundings, he's never had an issue with it. And it's something he excels well at. I would assume that's going to continue, which is part of the reason why I think some of his powers are going to be a lot more broken. Especially now, right? He knows what Ryo is. But we also know what Ryo is now too. And what's interesting to me about just that, because I'm not going to get too much into Ryo, just the fact that hockey has density to it. It's not something I really thought about all that much. I've always thought about hockey from a volume standpoint, just amount. I never really thought about hockey having density, but the panel with Whitebeard and Roger kind of brought that point home a little bit stronger to me, that it's a possibility that it has density, which would make more sense now looking at the Katakuri fight. Not just like him saying, like the situation with this armament, it's not that it was just stronger, but it might have been denser as well. And you can be more dense than something and not be stronger than it, right? But I don't think that was the case with Katakuri. You could make that argument, and that's part of what Kaido's got going on, right? It's not his volume and, the fact that he's a dragon or any of that other stuff. I think his hockey is extremely dense. It's not just a massive amount, it's a massive dense amount. And that makes a huge difference, because the fact that Luffy's strongest attacks, right, did absolutely nothing to Kaido or Big Mom for that matter. And then we see him learn Ryo, and the first thing he's doing is punching metal. And the first, if you look back, I think it was Sanji. It was either Sanji, I'm almost certain it was Sanji. He referred to Big Mom as an iron balloon. So those two kind of correlate, right? Which to me says, if you imagine either King Kong Gun or just Kong Gun in general, right? Whatever Luffy's strongest Kong Gun is, he needs that with Ryo. And that is the minimum, and I do mean probably the minimum amount of damage, force, whatever you want to call it, that you would have to do to even scratch, touch, graze against, even get a drip of sweat from a Yonko. That's how much you have to bring. So it's not just in terms of what's coming up in Wano and some of these fights. This is going to be for the entire series, something that's going to be mapped out. I don't think the hockey part is going to be explained super thoroughly, because that might be something that's also saved when we get Vegapunk and stuff like that. Like, we know we're going to talk about Devil Fruits with him, but I do think because of Haki and Sea Stone and their relation to Devil Fruits and souls and frequency, whole nother video on that stuff and getting sidetracked, but I think that stuff is going to be left for him. I don't think we're going to get that in Wano. And if you look at also about Luffy, the entire series, other than his natural growth, because he is a human, right? He's never really grown like he would if he worked out the same way Zoro does, right? Because Luffy doesn't work out, not that we're aware of anyway. He gets stronger just by repetition. So by that aspect, it's very possible that this whole time, one of the reasons why he doesn't grow like you would not say expect. He's not like some little kid, you know what I mean? But I do think with how much fighting he does and how strong he is, His appearance might have been slightly different already, but the fact that he's rubber keeps it from being that way. And so we see now in Udon, right, when he's doing his time in Udon prison, this is the first time he's not been rubber in a long time, in years, in fact, with the exception of when he gets hit right in that area with Haki, he's not rubber. But other than that, he's been rubber for quite some time now. This is his first experience doing stuff without being rubber. And I think that alone was enough to raise his base strength. Not like a crazy amount, but he might be 10-20% stronger already, not including Rio, just the training without cuffs as a normal person. So when he went back to being just rubber and not flesh, he probably got stronger. That's what I'm thinking anyway, where that's going. And to add to that, right, if rubber bounces and stretches and he's not utilizing stickiness of rubber, once again, Katakuri, trouble, big issues, he's probably going to incorporate that for himself. And I feel the same way about Rokuogon, because it was a move that devastated him, where him being rubber didn't matter, right? Him being rubber had no effect. It didn't help him. No advantages whatsoever when it came to Rokuogon. And I don't remember the exact translation, but either whatever it has to do with the 6 powers of Rokushiki, right? I'm pretty sure Rokuogan was translates to like 6 King Gun or something like that. And knowing how Luffy is and just how goofy Oda is in general, him having a Rio King Kong gun sounds pretty close to Rokuogan to me. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. And it makes sense, right? Because once again, even in the panel when he's learning Rio and he's punching the metal, it's almost the same stance as when we first saw Pistol. And I could see Pistol functioning like that from a Rio standpoint, because him, like the stretching that he does, right? And I'm falling back into the density of Haki. What if it's also compressible? Which would make sense to me, right? When you see stuff like Shigan and just different things in the series, right? If Haki itself is compressible and Luffy in his essence is rubber, him being able to compress Haki in some kind of weird way, I could see that later on being something that's very necessary and also pretty damaging. Now, I don't think, this ain't Hunter x Hunter, so I'm not saying that all the power systems are going to be fully developed in detail that way, but I do think it's a big possibility based on how Luffy fights and the opponents he's faced and who it's possible he will face in the future, because I think that's important too in the series stuff. Because to deal with somebody like Blackbeard, you're going to have to get around a lot of this stuff. Because even from a Blackbeard standpoint, right, he's basically a broken One Piece version of Pain because of what he can do. One of the moves that he did with the Yami Yami was, what is it called, Kurozu, where he draws you in. Well, that works on objects, whether you're a Devil Fruit user or, what he did before was the move Liberation, when he drew everything in and spit it back out, destroyed. That means he can carry people inside of him. Pause. But he can. He does. We don't see that utilized. But just like Caribou and Capone, technically Blackbeard has what I've been calling a pocket dimension fruit. We see this thing where there's some dimension that exists in between whatever and whatever, where items can be stored, people, whatever. So if you're dealing with somebody like Blackbeard, who also has the power of the Gurgura, he can pull you in, push you away, and I was even thinking something even worse. What if Blackbeard can draw you in and quick bubble the inside of himself without hurting himself? I'm not sure how that would work. I don't think that would make too much sense because of the double damage thing, but it's something that could be possible, where if you get caught by Blackbeard, he doesn't have to just turn off your Devil Fruit. If you're a Devil Fruit user, he could just pull you in and just bubble quake you. You have nowhere to go and you're just gonna sit there and, you know what I mean? It'd be brutal. So I do think dealing with Blackbeard for Luffy, he's going to need some type of compressible Haki or some sort of pseudo projectile. And what's also interesting is, right, anyway, Luffy could utilize all these things at his disposal because his fruit is so flexible and so is his imagination. It just so happens that he's also very, very strong to begin with, right? And because of things like Red Hawk, where if he can change the temperature of his rubber and become sticky, that would let him move his body similar to Katakuri's or something like Treble, where he can do something weird like that. He's not known for doing anything like that. So I think it would catch people off guard. And we could run into a situation where we start to see, like I was explaining about, the stickiness. Like them sticky hands from the grocery store and ice cream man used to get, and they worked for like a day until they got dirt and pet hair all over them. They didn't stick no more. Because of the comedy of One Piece, I could definitely see Luffy with some sticky hand attack or something, or even worse, he sticks to you and draws you into one of these Rio King Kong guns and cracks your face open. That's where I think that's going anyway. But in his case, he's had so much time of just daily utilization of his fruit, actually fighting people and fighting strong opponents on top of that, to where I think we're going to start seeing the more broken stuff. And I think when you're awakened, right? I don't think once you're awakened, it's something you turn on. I think it's something that changes how your fruit abilities work by default. Because even with Katakuri, we didn't hear him say like awakening, and then, you know what I mean? He just does it. That's why I think Luffy is already showing bright products of awakening by being able to bounce his arms off of air, because it's already active. It's already interacting with the environment in a way that doesn't make sense, even for the series. That doesn't make sense. So I think it's something that happens along the way, similar to whatever the process for the Black Blade is, right? Because with the Black Blade process, however you master each level of the Hakis, I'm not going to get into Conquerors, but just observation and armament, those are mastered over time. It's not something like, oh, I learned it yesterday and 2 months later, unless you're the main character, it just is not going to work like that. So I do think that it makes sense for him to be at the level that where he's at now, and he's honestly probably more broken than what we think, because Oda's hiding stuff. To me, it seems obvious that he's hiding moves, because for Luffy to cover some of these weaknesses, it's going to take a little bit more. And his biggest weakness really is only Haki efficiency. Once he's got this down, and I'm not sure how efficient he can get with his Haki, I would assume it has to get as good as how, I'll put it to you like this. You know how precise Conquerors can be, to the point where you can select who you want to knock out of a room, or an area in general. We could see something similar with how precise he can be with his armament, to where it gets to that point, especially when you're accounting for Rio. Remember when Luffy got knocked out of Haki, or he fell out of Haki back in Dressrosa the first time? We've seen what happened. Like, he looked dead, he looked kind of like not shriveled up. He just looked, he was just steaming, looked like the same way he activates Gear 2nd is what he looks like when he fell out of Gear 4th. And I think being able to be rubber at your essence is giving him some advantages that only a fruit like that would have. And like I was stating before, if you add all this stuff up, from him being able to become sticky in the future, you think about Rio, moves like Kongan or Oregon, or even UFO, Black Mamba with Rio, stuff like that is going to be nasty. And I'm not even talking about like his observation. I'm just, once again, just his physical abilities and the abilities of rubber itself. The more the more I rewatch Whole Cake Island and how he functioned, and just going back each arc, watching how he used to fight, it makes so much more sense to me now. That's where it's probably going. Of course, his Oda and ankles always get broken, but it would make a lot of sense to me if that's how he ends up where he is as far as strength and his abilities. And by default, even Gear 4th, right? Even Boundo, man, the bouncing. which initially seemed like a big joke, right? Even to Dofi, until you got cracked in the face. Boundo Man, I think, only bounces because Luffy cannot yet control all of those things at the same time. And it's like a sensory overload situation because he's trying to control the tension of his rubber, which has been noted more than once by Katakuri and Rayleigh, almost immediately. Trying to control his haki, because remember what Dofi said, he's mixing his haki with his fruit. I think that's an important distinction between him mixing his haki with fruit and actually coating himself, or making his armament go throughout his body. However you want to word that, I think there's a huge difference between those two things. And then you add the stickiness, stuff that he could be doing later, like with there's something else too, but I think that only applies to producers, so I'll leave that for another video. But yeah, Luffy he's getting there. He's not there yet, but when he gets there, I can't wait, because I think when we actually get more detailed fights in the future, because I do think we're gonna get some. It's not gonna, once again, this ain't Hunter x Hunter, but I do think we're gonna get those detailed fights coming up, because there's gonna be some situation where, especially in the event that if Luffy ever has to engage in one of these days of fighting situation, which I'm not going to get too much into that, but it seems that it's really hard to imagine Luffy, of all people, due to his haki efficiency especially, fighting somebody for that many days. It just doesn't seem like his abilities and how he fights is built for that to begin with. He has the endurance and the willpower, but I think how much energy it takes to do stuff, especially with haki, it kind of doesn't. I don't know. We'll see. I guess we'll see. You could probably make that same argument for anybody in the series, right? That has a devil fruit ability, or they use haki a lot. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about the Gomu Gomu Man, and he's not that smart outside of the battlefield, but he's still my captain, and he deserves the respect that he's earned. If you had your fruit for almost 15 years, I wonder if you would be in the same position as Luffy with your powers and abilities. Who knows? You could be better. You could also be worse. Oh man. But anyway, thanks for hanging out, and yeah, it's been cool. I'm gonna talk about some more stuff later. But tell me what you think. What you think Luffy has going on with himself? What do you think he's going to be doing later? What old attacks are we going to see from him? Does he have any forms? And I don't mean like Gear 5th. I mean, does he have other forms of like Gear 4th already in the works? And what do you think he's going to do to cover up some of his obvious weaknesses? Or what do you think Oda's going to do about that? Let me know in the comments. And thanks for stopping by. Like the video, subscribe, all that stuff. And I appreciate y'all's continued support. I'm going to keep grinding it away. Peace.